6 crops: saffron, ginseng, wasabi, bamboo shoots, medicinal mushrooms, and microgreens can earn up to $280,000 per acre. Most American farmers never hear their names. For 70 years, agricultural universities focused on corn and soybeans. They ensured this knowledge stayed buried. Why protect a system where 5 acres of ginseng out earn 200 acres of corn? They did not hide these crops because they failed. They hid them because they succeeded, without corporate control. The official story omits the vault of these high-profit crops. But the archive is opening now. What else have they kept locked away? Saffron does not bend to the will of machines. 1 acre, 3 to 5 pounds of vivid red threads, each pound worth up to $15,000. The numbers are not folklore. Pennsylvania State University trials confirm 2.5 pounds per acre by year 3. Every flower must be picked by hand. 150,000 blossoms for a single acre. No combine, no chemical shortcut. The labor cannot be replaced. So the profits cannot be scaled by corporations. In the hills of Pennsylvania, a small grower works dawn to dusk, harvesting what no machine can touch. By season's end, that acre yields more than $100,000, 10 times the return of corn, without a single drop of glyphosate or a loan for a new tractor. Ginseng waits longer for its reward. 5 to 7 years in the shade of Appalachian forests. The roots twist and thicken in silence. When maturity arrives, a single acre can fetch up to $200,000. The market is global. Demand from Asia drives prices to $1,200 per pound for wild simulated roots. Appalachian families have passed down the knowledge for generations. No corporation can rush the clock. The land and the years decide the harvest. The system calls it inefficient. The numbers call it freedom. Labor and patience, not scale, break the rules of profit. 95% of wasabi served in America is a fraud. Green paste, dyed horseradish flavored with mustard oil. The real plant, Wasabia japonica, demands patience, shade, and pure running water. Pacific Northwest growers know the truth. True wasabi commands up to $280,000 per acre. Chefs pay $50 per pound for the authentic stem, if they can find it. Imitation is not just tolerated, it is protected. The food industry profits from the fake, while the genuine crop remains locked behind a wall of secrecy and logistics. Real wasabi cannot be mass-produced. It cannot be trucked in from industrial fields. The supply is limited by nature, not by marketing. Bamboo shoots offer a different kind of threat. 1 planting. The land yields for decades. Shoots command up to $20 per pound, with annual returns reaching $120,000 per acre after year 3. In the American South, bamboo thrives with minimal input. No fertilizer, no irrigation, small efforts, big returns. But the system fights back. State agriculture boards label bamboo as an invasive menace. Restrictions and outright bans appear not on the ornamental grass, but on the edible varieties that feed families and fortunes. The law is not written to protect the land. It is written to protect the commodity system. Profitable perennials are called dangerous. The most lucrative crops are made illegal. Wasabi and bamboo expose the game. If a crop cannot be controlled, it is counterfeited. If it cannot be counterfeited, it is outlawed. Stop, reset, reveal. Shiitake and lion's mane do not grow in fields. They grow in shadows, on cut hardwood logs stacked behind a craftsman's shed. In the Pacific Northwest, 1,000 logs yield a slow but steady fortune. Each log produces up to 4 pounds of mushrooms a year. Restaurant buyers pay $12 to $20 per pound for fresh shiitake and more for reishi and lion's mane. The logs last 5 years. No fertilizer, no diesel, just patience and the right wood. A single acre, managed by one person, can bring in $50,000 to $200,000 over the harvest cycle. No bank loans, no crop insurance. The system calls this a hobby. The numbers call it survival. 1,000 miles east, profit grows at the speed of light. In a converted garage, trays of microgreens line metal racks. Sunflower, radish, pea shoots. 10 days from seed to harvest. Restaurants pay $25 to $40 per pound. 1/10 of an acre indoors yields as much as a 10-acre soybean field. No chemical inputs, no weather risk, no subsidies. The operator controls everything: water, light, temperature. Each tray flips every 2 weeks. The cash flow never stops. This is agriculture unchained from the land, from the bank, from the commodity market. Mushrooms and microgreens. 2 ends of the spectrum. Years in the woods, days under LED lights, both ignored by the system. Both proven by the ledger. In 1920, the American farm was 40 acres, not 4,000. Census ledgers from that year record a reality now erased from textbooks. Small family farms earned 3, sometimes 5 times more per acre than the industrial giants that replaced them. The numbers do not lie. A diversified farm in the hills of Kentucky or the valleys of Pennsylvania could net $2,000 per acre. More than 10 times the returns of corn or wheat, even after adjusting for inflation. Ginseng plots in Appalachia, mushrooms in the Pacific Northwest, market gardens ringing every Midwestern town. These were not hobbyists. They were the economic backbone of rural America. Farm income statements, preserved in county courthouses and USDA archives, reveal margins that modern commodity growers can only imagine. In the years before World War II, a family of 5 could prosper on 40 acres, sending children to college, paying off land, growing old without debt. The secret was not scale, but selection. High-value crops rotated with livestock and orchard rows. They fed local markets. They built generational wealth. In 1935, 1 acre of ginseng brought in value greater than 100 bushels of corn. Mushroom sheds on the outskirts of Seattle yielded cash flows rivaling city businesses. The numbers are written in ink, not nostalgia. 3 to 5 times the income per acre. No chemical subsidies, no government insurance. Just skill, sweat, and the right crops. The data isolates a lost prosperity. Proof that the American family farm was never doomed by its size. It was made obsolete by design. The ledgers stand as silent witnesses. 40 acres. 3 to 5 times the income. A vanished model, waiting in the margins of the record for those willing to look. Tractors rolled onto American fields in the years after World War II. Steel and diesel replaced the hands and horses that had built rural prosperity. The change was fast. The change was relentless. By 1950, the number of farms in the United States stood at 5.5 million. Within 2 decades, that number would fall by 60%. The survivors watched. Neighbors vanished from the census. Land absorbed by the few who could afford the latest machines. The average farm tripled in size between 1950 and 1970. Efficiency was redefined, not by profit per acre, but by acres per man and the speed of the combine. The 1954 Agricultural Act rewarded scale. Policy and credit flowed to those who planted commodity crops, corn, soybeans, and wheat. Crops that could be harvested by machine, stored in bins, and traded by the ton. The ledger no longer favored skill or selection. It favored those who borrowed for equipment, those who bought chemical inputs by the truckload, those willing to surrender the old model for the new. Land-grant universities, flush with corporate endowments, rewrote their curricula to match the machinery on the market. Extension agents stopped visiting smallholders with advice on mushrooms or ginseng and began promoting hybrid corn and chemical weed control. The system filtered out what could not be mechanized. Saffron, ginseng, bamboo, and mushrooms all deemed inefficient, not because they failed to profit, but because they failed to fit the mold. The door closed quietly. By 1970, the American farm was no longer a patchwork of high-value crops and livestock. It was a monoculture, shaped by policy, enforced by economics, and policed by the silent logic of the machine. The filter was not nature. The filter was steel. In the decades after World War II, the financial lifeblood of American agriculture flowed through the land-grant universities. These were not just schools. They became the gatekeepers of what counted as real farming. By 1960, industry money was no longer a trickle. It was a steady current. John Deere endowed research chairs at Illinois, Purdue, and Iowa State. Monsanto and DuPont funded laboratories for chemical weed control. The budgets grew, and so did the influence. Extension bulletins filled with advice on hybrid corn, fertilizer trials, and the economics of scale. Course catalogs thickened with classes on commodity management and mechanized harvest. The specialty crops faded from the curriculum. Ginseng, saffron, forest mushrooms. They did not disappear in a single moment. They vanished by omission. By 1970, a review of the largest land-grant universities shows almost no dedicated instruction in these crops. At Penn State, ginseng survives as a footnote in a forestry elective. At Texas A&M, bamboo is mentioned only as an invasive species to eradicate, never as a food crop. The trend is clear in the numbers. In 1950, a student could find a handful of courses on medicinal plants or small-scale horticulture. By 1970, those offerings had dropped to near zero. Funding dictated the syllabus. The classroom became a reflection of the donor's interests. What could not be mechanized, what could not be sold by the ton, was erased from the education of a generation. The erasure was not announced. It was enacted through silence and omission. It was enforced by the logic of money. The university, once the champion of local knowledge and diverse crops, became the enforcer of the new agricultural order. What was taught in the classroom defined what was possible on the land. The rails of American agriculture run on subsidies, insurance, and credit. Not all crops qualify for the ride. Since the 1970s, federal payments have flowed almost exclusively to corn, soybeans, and wheat. The agriculture risk coverage and price loss coverage programs, written into the 2014 and 2018 farm bills, guarantee billions each year to farmers who plant the right commodities. The rules are explicit. Only crops with a history of large-scale planting, easy storage, and mechanized harvest are eligible. Saffron, ginseng, wasabi, bamboo, mushrooms, and microgreens do not appear on the lists. They receive no price supports, no disaster payments, no subsidized insurance. 80% of all federal crop subsidies land in the pockets of commodity growers. Less than 5% reaches specialty producers, and then only through minor block grants with strings attached. The government's own Economic Research Service confirms the imbalance. In 2022, corn alone received over $8 billion in direct support. Ginseng and saffron, zero. The barriers do not end with the USDA. Farm credit system banks and commercial lenders rely on risk manuals that classify specialty crops as speculative. Loan officers demand collateral, crop insurance, and multi-year yield histories. The absence of federal backing becomes the justification for denial. A mushroom grower in Oregon, a microgreens operator in Ohio. Both face rejection letters, not operating loans. The pattern is written in policy. What cannot be insured cannot be financed. What cannot be financed cannot scale. The system does not need to outlaw high-profit crops. It simply starves them of support, one rule and one loan at a time. The economic rails run straight and narrow, steering every farmer toward the same fields of corn and soy. The ledger is the law. The crops that could set farmers free are locked out by design. In the Ozark Hills, a handful of families kept a different ledger. While the world chased tractors and chemicals, their work moved quietly through the woods. Oak logs drilled and filled by hand, stacked beneath the canopy. This was the Ozark Mushroom Guild, a community that never surrendered the old craft. Every spring, they gathered for inoculation, trading spawn and stories as their grandparents had before them. The universities offered no guidance. Extension agents ignored their calls. Yet the logs fruited year after year, through drought and flood. Techniques passed mouth to ear, not written in textbooks, not broadcast from research stations. The Guild's records show continuous harvests since the 1940s. Shiitake and oyster mushrooms grown on native hardwood, sold at roadside stands and local markets. No crop insurance, no government grants, just skill, patience, and a memory for moisture and shade. Their persistence kept a living proof alive. Profitable agriculture did not vanish. It retreated into the margins, guarded by those unwilling to forget. The Ozark Guild stands as a reminder. Knowledge survives where institutions fail. The chain is only broken if the hands let go. In 2009, a pilot farm in Oregon began with a half-acre of real wasabi. By year 4, their ledger showed over $200,000 per acre in wholesale contracts. Every stem sold to chefs from Seattle to San Francisco. The crop thrived in shaded greenhouses, watered by mountain runoff. No subsidies, no crop insurance, only the numbers mattered. Across the Great Lakes, a cooperative of 6 families planted edible bamboo on abandoned dairy land. 3 seasons later, their shoots brought in over $90,000 per acre, verified by Michigan State Extension audits. The cooperative handled harvest and sales directly, bypassing processors. The state called the crop invasive. The buyers called it a delicacy. The profits stayed in the community. In Nebraska, a former soybean warehouse became racks of microgreens. 10,000 trays, flipped every 2 weeks. Annual gross income, $1.2 million from less than a single acre indoors. University of Nebraska Outreach documented the results and offered no curriculum. The operator paid cash for the building, cash for the seed, cash for the land. No debt, no middleman. Control remained with the grower. The proof is written in balance sheets, not promises. The appendix numbers hold true. Small acreage, 6 figures. Today, audited ledgers from pilots in Oregon, Michigan, and Nebraska. Real farms, real contracts, real invoices. Proof in black and white. Today, the average American farm earns less per acre than it did in 1986. Specialty crops remain a path few are shown. Corporate interests tighten their grip. The window for independent prosperity narrows. The real barrier is not climate or soil. It is access to knowledge. Who decides what you are allowed to grow rich from next? Share your thoughts below.